Hello, my dear friends. I have said a number of times that I am always jealous of Rabbi Wine because he flies on the plane, and almost every single time he has this fascinating encounter with the person sitting next to him, and he's able to build an entire drasha from that exchange. Well, I have flown many times over the years. I'm a rabbi almost 40 years, beginning my 40th year. Every time I get on the plane, I think, maybe this time I'll have a drasha. One time I sat next to somebody on the airplane, I was able to extract the drasha, but almost never. I mean, that was one time in 40 years. So this time I was again hopeful. I got on the airplane. I was returning to New Jersey. It was the night of Yom HaAtzmaut, and I thought maybe it's Yom HaAtzmaut. Maybe something will happen that'll connect to Yom HaAtzmaut. Well, I'm sitting there. I'm on the aisle seat. The two seats next to me were empty. And then as the people were coming out of the plane, I thought maybe, who knows, who's gonna be the interesting person or couple that's gonna sit next to me. Finally, this middle-aged couple comes, a husband and his wife, and they excuse themselves. I let them go into the middle of the aisles and the window seat, and I politely said hello, but I could tell from the person's response that he doesn't really speak English. My hopes were dashed. How am I going to have a drasha from somebody who can't even communicate in the English language? Well, God has his ways. We're sitting on the tarmac. The plane was delayed. We were in the tarmac for about 20 minutes. And then all of a sudden I see the person. I have to tell you one more thing. I was on the plane. I took advantage of the time to rewrite my Shabbos Haggadah drasha. For me, planes are the best place to be because I don't have a phone and I don't have email. I don't sign up for Wi-Fi, and I could do so much work on the plane. So I was writing my Shabbos Haggadah drasha, and the man turns to me, and I see that he's struggling to say something, but he can't find the words because he doesn't speak English, and he finally tells me, you wrong way. How come I was writing my drasha in Hebrew, so I'm going right to left? How come you're going the wrong way? I told him this is Hebrew. Hebrew, we don't go the same way as everybody else. We do our own thing. Then he says to me, he says, "You're Jewish?" I said, "Yes." He says, "I admire the Jews." Again, he did it in broken English, so I can't duplicate it. He said, "I admire the Jews." I said, "Yes, that's very nice." He says, "All the empires are gone. For 3,000 years, all the big, powerful empires are gone, and the Jews have survived after 3,000 years." Wow. This is what he's telling me the night of Yom HaAtzmaut. I thought, look at that. I'm just like Rabbi Wine. What a fascinating encounter to have. The person was found out from Colombia. How many Jews are there in Colombia? How much exposure has he had to Jewish people in Colombia? But he sits down next to a Jewish rabbi, and he sees me writing Lashon Kodesh, right to left, and he tells me, the Jews are special because they survive for 3,000 years. So I said to him, do you know, what's even more amazing is that they were the weakest people. They were constantly persecuted and expelled from they were thrown out of one country after another country. They didn't have their own land, and still they survived. He said, that's even more miraculous. He says, well, today they're very powerful. So I took out my phone. I said, do you know how big the state of it? He said, in Israel, they're powerful. I said, you know how big the state of Israel is? So I pulled up a map on Google of the Mideast. I said, you see that little tiny speck there, a little triangle surrounded by all those other big countries? That little speck is the state of Israel. I told him it's the size of New Jersey. I don't know if he knew what New Jersey was, but that makes the miracle even greater. That Israel for the last 70 years, we're celebrating Yom HaAtzmaut, more than 74 years. Israel's survival in the state of Israel is an unbelievable miracle. It's a little tiny state. When Israel's independence was declared, there was about 500,000 Jews in Israel. How did they survive against millions and millions, and they had no arms and no weapons? And if you've read the history of the period, the miracles and the way they were able to get planes and ammunition and the bravery and the sacrifices, it's a miracle. And that is what this man was telling me about the survival of the Jewish people. Even a non-Jewish person from Colombia recognized that, wow, look at how the Jews have managed to survive. That you see what a miraculous event it was. Even he was able to recognize it. I'm sure you know the famous essay by Mark Twain, where he makes the very same point. He says, the Jews, he talks about Jewish survival. He says, he has made a marvelous fight in the world in all ages, and he has done it with his hands tied behind him. He could be vain of himself and be excused for it. The Egyptian, the Babylonian, and the Persian rose, filled the planet with sound and splendor, then faded to dream stuff and passed away. The Greek and the Roman followed and made a vast noise, and they are gone. Other peoples have sprung up and held their torch high for a time, but it burned out, and they sit in twilight now or have vanished. The Jew saw them all, beat them all, and is now what he always was. And then he concludes, all things are mortal, but the Jew. Here, Mark Twain recognized everything's mortal except for the Jew. All other forces pass, but he remains. And then he asks the question, what is the secret of his immortality? Wow, it's a good question that Mark Twain's asking. How's it possible? How did Jews survive? I'm thinking, look at the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. Look at the brutality. Look how they just slaughter people, innocent people, not even people, members of the armed forces, men, women, children, the aged, hospitals. They bomb them, they slaughter them, they line them up in the street, they tie their hands behind their back, they torture them, and they murder them. And with such force. That's what has been happening to the Jewish people throughout the centuries. One pogrom after another, one persecution. I came home, I had a ride, the cab driver was from Egypt. I asked him his name, he said, Elliot. I said, is that a Jewish Elliot? He says, what do you think? Elliot's Jewish. His parents came from Egypt. And if you know the history in Egypt, they were there until 1956, and the Jewish community was decimated. The same way there was a Holocaust in Europe. Those of us who are Ashkenazi are not so familiar with the Mideastern Holocaust, but there was a Mideastern Holocaust as well. One country after another, whichever Jews, the Jews that were able to get out were so lucky, but the rest of them were murdered and slaughtered. So how did the Jewish people manage to survive? And that's what the story of the Chad Gadya is. That's exactly what it's about. The Jew is compared to the kid. The father bought the kid. The Kadosh Baruch Hu is the father, and then comes along a stronger force. Then the cat ate the gedi, and then the dog ate the cat, and it goes from one level to the next. It keeps on escalating. And each generation is more and more powerful. So you think the Jews, what chance did they have? They were already swallowed up in the first stanza. They're gone. And then you get to the last stanza and everybody's dead. The Malach HaMavis is the one who wipes everybody out, and then HaKadosh Baruch Hu wipes out the Malach HaMavis. So it's like a Shakespearean tragedy. At the end of the play, everyone is dead. They're all on the stage. Everybody dies. But what's different here in this case is that maybe all the other nations are gone. They've all, in spite of their big splendor, some of them lasted a century, and some 2, 3, 4, whatever. But they're all gone. But the Jews, after 3,000 years, the Jews have managed to survive. In Hatikva is a powerfully moving poem and song. And even secular Jews relate to Hatikva. It is a terrific song. There's one thing wrong with Hatikva, which I'm sure you know, and that is the Hatikva talks about the same thing, the immortality of the Jewish people, and how the Jews clung on to that dream. Odo of the Tikva Seinu, our hope and our faith has not been lost. Hatikva Shnas Alpayim, 2,000 years of yearning to be back. Lios Am Chavshi B'Artzeinu, to be free in our land. Eretz Zion Yerushalayim. That's such a moving phrase that the Jews, they're waiting in Golos for 2,000 years, and now finally they returned to Eretz Yisrael. So what's wrong with Hatikva is that they don't explain, like Mark Twain, what's the secret of their immortality? They leave that hanging for the listener. It's like as if it just happened, you know? I mean, it's not only the Jewish survival, but that the Jews tenaciously held on to their love for Eretz Yisrael. How could people love a land after centuries of being disconnected from it and have nothing to do with it? I mean, being totally exiled from there. And how did it manage that dream? How did the dream survive? So that the Hatikva, everything it says there, but it left out the most important point is, how did they survive? How did the dream survive? How is it possible? So the answer is the Chassid. I mean, we all know the answer. But the Chassid Yavitz, who was a famous Jewish Spanish philosopher, he lived in the time of the Barbanel. He suffered through the Geber Sfard. He was one of the people that were exiled by King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, those great monarchs who were instrumental in dispatching Columbus to America. But they were Rishayim. They destroyed the Jewish community. They exiled them. So many people died along the way. They were just totally displaced. So the Chafetz Yavitz, his name was Rav Yosef Yavitz. He's called the Chassid Yavitz. He lived through that period, and he writes in one of his farm that the survival of the Jewish people, he wrote this 500 years ago, the survival of the Jewish people is the greatest miracle that we've witnessed. It exceeds the miraculous nature of Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's a bigger miracle than Yetzias Mitzrayim and Kriyas Yamsuf. The Jewish survival. And when you think about it, again, even Mark Twain was able to recognize it. Even my Colombian travel mate was able to recognize it. How is it possible? There's no logic to it. How could it be? So the answer is, as the Chafetz Yavitz says, it's a nes. And a nes means, nisim do not happen on their own. Nisim mean that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is behind the scenes. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is orchestrating everything. That's why in the Chad Gadya, the Gadya survives, but who does he survive with? It's the Zab and Abba. It's the Rebbeinu Shalom. Rebbeinu Shalom's there behind the scenes, as we say in Shir Hashirim. He's Omer Achar Kasleinu, Metzis Menacharakim. The Kadosh Baruch Hu is behind the wall. He's looking through the cracks in the wall. He's watching us. He's protecting us. He's observing us. He's sustaining our existence. That's the secret. Mark Twain, if he was here live, I would call him up today and say, Mark, or Mr. Twain, I don't know, or Mr. Clemens, you asked the terrific questions. What's the secret to the immortality? Immortality, not immorality. Immortality. He said, the answer is, Mr. Twain, is the Rebbeinu Shalom. That's the secret. It's because HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world, and it is God Almighty who has ensured the survival of the Jewish people, the Jewish dream, and the return to Eretz Yisrael and Yerushalayim.